Start off the show, though. Let's welcome to the show from the Council of Trade Unions, the CTU, economist Craig Renney. Craig, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. I'll just get rid of that little ginger while we talk. Oh shit! Major issue. Back ASAP. Hopefully, that's the message from Chewie. So we'll move on.
I thought you were talking about the National Party there.
I mean, honestly, this is not what we're here to talk about, but the conversation with Mike Hosking yesterday was, it was like, I don't want to be hyperbolic. It was more than embarrassing. I actually think it was kind of dangerous because it showed this person who is the leader of our country not be able to answer a question. You know, politicians do that all the time. They don't answer questions. But when he realized his non-answer wasn't working, then he didn't have the political nous to change direction. You know, everyone always complains about the, whatever it was, 2007 Rugby World Cup when New Zealand got beaten by France. And one of the big criticisms from the coaching team was the players on the field, when the plan didn't work, weren't able to change the plan. And I was watching Luxon yesterday, and I've seen it again today. Obviously, it's everywhere now. And I'm like, your plan's not working. The thing that's most concerning to me, and as I say, potentially dangerous, he's in Vietnam at the moment. If his plan doesn't work in Vietnam, or if it puts people offside, he doesn't seem to have the capacity to go, okay, I need to move away from my PR talking points and actually back myself. And if he can't back himself, that's terrifying, Craig.
I think if you were being unkind, if I had written that as satire, it would have been rejected as being unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, there are 8 or 9 opportunities to actually change track. There are 8 or 9 opportunities. Actually, a good politician might have just said, listen, let's move on. Let's talk about something else. But it was as if, you know, his program had just gone into a loop.
Yeah.
And there was nowhere else to go. In what's genuinely terrifying about that is that there's nothing else to talk about. There's nothing else on his mind to actually say, well, hang on a second, let's talk about the other things that we're doing. Let's talk about something else. There's no lightness of foot. There's no ability to think. And that really should worry everyone. But yes, I think when I read it, the voices I had in my head weren't Christopher Luxon's. It was a yes minister speech. Rather than, or a thick of it speech, rather than actually being a radio interview in New Zealand.
Yeah. I mean, thick of it kind of works. That's probably quite an appropriate way to think about it. Honestly, I hadn't seen it before we did the show, so I watched it live, raw for the first time on the show. I was dumbfounded. I was like, please, people who voted for this man, explain what we've just witnessed. And of course, no one has. No one's come out to support him. And I'm like, some of us have seen this kind of thing, not even that bad for a long time. So I just wonder if next year that interview will be on loop and all the Greens and all the Labour advertising, you know, for the next election.
The thing is, it wasn't about something enormously valuable. We weren't selling the nuclear secrets, the nuclear codes to a third country. This was about whether or not you would have fired someone if they had not resigned.
The one thing I did read online, it was a comment, it might have been a commentary in one of our posts, was someone saying, and I don't necessarily believe this because last night we were Occam's razoring this thing, Craig, going, why did this happen? What's the most, and we couldn't really figure out the most likely. And someone said, maybe he's got something on Luxon. Maybe there's something more. And he has to actually tread carefully. Maybe this wet tissue of a minister who, even though they talk about how fast he wants to move, seems to be the slowest moving MP in the world in his speech and his movements, everything. Maybe he gave Luxon a bit of a what for when he resigned and said, if you throw me under the bus, sir, there's going to be some things you don't like. Maybe. And I don't know if I believe that, but I can't think of logical reasons why he did that.
It would be fascinating to think that there's some compromat on the Prime Minister, but I think probably in all reality, the PM simply had one of those moments that politicians have when they don't have the ability to just say the thing that's in their brain because they've been told not to say the thing that's inside their brain. And I think the kindest thing we can do in this space is just simply say, the PM had a senior moment, and that we hope he doesn't keep having these, because otherwise it doesn't bode well at the cabinet table with Mr. Seymour and with Mr. Peters.
But we've said for a long time that many people say in the vicinity that Seymour and Peters are running rings around him. And from that performance yesterday, I'd be like, oh, and everybody else sitting at that table, because that looked like the weakest, most pathetic politician I've seen for a very long time. And I'm not saying this because they're not my team. Like, I'm just, and I know that I'm being objective just to look at it, because none of the people who voted for him have come to his support today. So they see it too. It's not just about us. Anyway, anywho, let us have a chat to you about what we are going to talk about. Report that came out this week. The government is claiming that violent crime drops for the first time since 2018. Violent crime drops for the first time since 2018. Police data show that violent crime have fallen for the first time since 2018, indicating that the government's tough on crime and victims first approach is working. Police Minister Mark Mitchell and Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith say. Now, you jump in, Chewie. I know you're trying to be polite there, Chewie, and just wait, but jump in, Chewie. Now, we were just padding time waiting for you, Chewie. Now, Craig, you've done some looking into this. You've showed your workings on Twitter. I have your workings on Twitter, but I was wondering, almost like giving you the control. How would you like to do this, and how would you like to talk about the claim that, as you've got there on your Twitter feed, violent crime has dropped for the first time since 2018?
Well, if I might, Pat, can we go back to the original ministerial statement?
We can. It is here.
Thank you. The very top of that, the thing that triggered my brain was the first line, police data shows.
Yep.
I thought, okay. And then if you scroll to the very bottom in the footnotes, because I tend to read things from the footnotes up rather than starting at the bottom.
Can I just say one thing? I'm sorry, I'm not looking to bully anyone here, but you're such a nerd, and we love you.
I really am. Trust me. 8 years at university. So you read the first line of the footnote.
Let me read it out. Let me read it out. So the first quote of the footnotes for those people. Okay, so we'll refresh this because I've been silly and got into it. The first line of the report says police data show that violent crime has fallen for the first time since 2018. The first line of the footnote says violent crime is not a category of data that police tracks. What?
These two things can't be true at the same time.
Yes, very true.
So I thought, well, hang on a second, and also then, if you go back to the footnote, there's it keeps going, because then it says, and therefore data is based off at Charter Daily's post. And I thought, these are two ministers of the Crown. These are two ministerial warrant holders, and they've put out a press release to the public based upon a tweet.
Yeah.
Not from official police statistics, not from somewhere else. It's just someone's tweet. Now, when we say annual violent crime victimizations in New Zealand, the police do collect data on crime victimizations, and they do break it down by different types of offense. But nowhere inside the police data does it say violent crime.
Right.
And as you can see in the bracketed section there, including common and sexual assaults, abductions, robberies, and blackmail. Right. But what else does it include? Because I don't know.
You say you read that first line and it sets some sort. And I mean, maybe I'm not the expert here, but I've always been of the understanding that things like murder and things like rape and things like youth crime have all been trending down. So what even makes up the classification of violent crime? Because if those things are trending down and have been trending down for a long time, I think like in the 80s and 90s, murder was the worst per capita. And since then, it's been on a trajectory down. There might have been some ups and downs, but in general, down. That's the most violent of crimes. So what are the crimes even included in violent crimes?
So things like extortion are in there. Assault not occasioning injury is in there. There's a range of different things, but the honest answer is there is no category called violent crime. It is whatever you choose to make it up to be. And as a consequence, when you say a violent crime has fallen for the first time, that is a self-selected category of crimes has fallen during a period of time. As you quite rightly say, Pat, if you take a longer time frame, most forms of crimes, certainly violent crimes, and certainly youth crime, has fallen for a very long period of time. Two, some crimes go up because we actually encourage people to record them. Domestic violence offences go up. The fact that domestic violence numbers go up isn't a bad thing. It's just recognizing something that previously was being hidden from society. And so as a consequence, we shouldn't berate the police force or we shouldn't berate the public because certain forms of crime numbers go up. There are complicated reasons why some crime figures go up, some crime figures go down.
Because that could also lead to the idea of fiddling the numbers. Because if the result was only about number must go down, then we might do something like, so let's just pick an imaginary thing out of the air, like people in emergency housing, that, you know, that a government might make it more difficult to get into an emergency housing because then numbers of people in emergency housing go down. A good result. I mean, that's just imaginary, Craig. I'm not saying that's ever happened anywhere.
Well, I used to work in the UK for a branch of government called the Audit Commission. And one of the things the Audit Commission used to do was find fraud in local government. Right. Police, NHS, all sorts of agencies. In 2010, the Audit Commission was abolished. And we decided no longer to audit local authorities and these other entities. As the government said at the time, armchair auditors would be auditing these authorities. That's not a joke. That's the exact line.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, local authority fraud, it just fell off a cliff.
Amazing. So it's just all cleared up just like that.
Just honestly, it was just this pesky organization turning up and looking at the numbers that was causing all of this fraud and causing all of these offenses. Now, there are also other forms of crime where there are external drivers that drive these things. As insurance goes up in society, you tend to find the number of burglary claims goes up because you need a police number to make a claim for burglary. And with your insurer, same with your car. So there's a range of factors as to why numbers go up. Finally, there's just the good old fact that over the past few years, we've seen a much larger population in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
As a consequence, more people just equals more crime. But if the numbers have to go up more than the population goes up in order for it to be meaningful. Instead, what we have here is a set of numbers that are moving around, and as a consequence, don't actually tell us a great deal about the state of crime in New Zealand, and in particular about all of those offences that aren't really reported or recorded in New Zealand, many of which are actually violent offences.
One question: what do we know about these guys, Chartered Daily? Like, this is the information, the tweet, as you say, that this government is basing this what seems to be a fairly bogus claim on. Who are these guys? Do these guys have any kind of bias? Do we know about them? Are they fair?
The honest answer is I don't know them from a bar of soap, Pat. They are a Twitter stream. I have no idea who actually runs Chartered Daily. I wouldn't want to say one way or the other that they were slanted backwards or forwards or any other way. What I would say is the Minister of Police and the Minister of Justice have access to hundreds, if not thousands, of public servants who can provide them with up-to-the-minute data on policing and crime and sentencing in New Zealand. You don't need to rely upon, as good intentioned as it may be, a private citizen's tweets where they're self-selecting a bunch of statistics to then put out a press release to say government policy is working.
My goodness. This is, I mean, can you imagine like any other party taking a poll of stuff.co.nz and go, look how favorable we are. Like they have got the people that gets the data, as you're saying. So if they're having to go to this amorphous group that nobody knows whether they're good, bad, or neutral, that's commentary in and of itself. Now, can I ask you this question, Craig? Then Chewie, you need to start talking because I could shut up. Have we heard anyone else in the media talking about this yet? Because I get the feeling that no one's really pushed back on this yet. At least I haven't heard much about it.
So I think there's an article in the Spin-off about the sort of the data, looking very, very flatly at the data and saying these things don't really hold. Certainly, I don't think anyone's really looked or at the correlation that's drawn in the press release and in the tweet between the number of incarcerated New Zealanders and crime. Because the actual press release, if you go back to the press release part, there's a line in the press release that says essentially the prison the number of people in prisons has now gone. This drop coincides with New Zealand's prison population hitting its highest level since 2018. Essentially, drawing an inference that because there are more people in prison, that is why violent crime, howsoever derived, has fallen. Now, I'm here to tell you that there's absolutely zero relationship between the prison population and crime in New Zealand, as there is pretty much anywhere else in the rest of the world. One of the most crime-ridden societies in the developed world is the US, which also has the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, I believe outside possibly of China. And so, these two numbers don't relate. And if you said, okay, well, the number of crimes went down last year, if you believe their statistics, which I don't, but if you believe that, then that's fine. If we go back another year to 2022, there are approximately 1,955 more prisoners than there were in 2022, but the crime rate is higher than 2022.
Right.
So
prison population goes up between 22 and 23, yet according to this, again, amorphous source, that the violent crime has gone up as well. So they can't make the claim that because prison population goes up, violent crime has come down, because it went up between 22 and 23 as well.
Absolutely. And if you look at the final thing always when you look at a chart is to sort of essentially ask the question, do these things, add up? So the prison population chart goes back to 2003.
Yep.
The violent crime chart goes back to 2016, but it's designed to look as if they're the same time period.
Yeah.
Craig, have you seen that this Twitter profile have answered you?
Yes, and they've given me their selection of offences, which is fine. But again, that's not to say why would we have a minister use that data? Why would we not use official police data, which exists? And I put the official police data for the various ANSOC crimes on my Twitter feed. And when I make the calculations on the calendar years, so January through to December for the past 3 years, essentially last year we saw a 0.7% fall in the number of violent offences in the category that I've derived. And it goes up from 2022 to 2024. So it falls like this year, but it falls a tiny, tiny little bit. And across 2 years, it's actually up 10%. So there's no minor fluctuations in the data. Just demonstrate the the fact that you want to derive a particular statistic and you want to draw a particular inference. A longer and a wider look at the data shows that the relationship that the ministers would like to show doesn't really exist.
So this is really, if I can read between the lines here, the case of a government that wants to cheerlead something that they have made an impact, and the only thing that they've got to back that up is a somewhat, let's be charitable, mysterious Twitter account is the only thing that they've got to back them up.
Well, the public can go, everyone can, anyone who has an internet connection can go and find the police statistics online. They are widely and publicly available, and they can draw their own inference if they want. They can look at their own data. They can do it. Actually, they can break it down to their own communities by hour if they really want to. The challenge that we have is that, normally speaking, when a minister puts out a press release, it's held to a higher standard than this.
Yeah.
Right. And as a consequence, when someone says something from, as the former prime minister used to say, the podium of truth, then they're doing so based upon something more than just a person's analysis at a particular point in time. We deserve a much better conversation about crime in this country, and a much more sophisticated conversation about crime than the one that's being had here.
This is like non-sophisticated. This is the kind of bullshit that we would do. This is the kind of crap that some moron on Twitter like me would put out before I got pushback from someone saying, well, look at the graphs. They're all different. They're different time lengths. What are you trying to say? Like, I'm not saying I'm going to put this out, but you know what I mean? It's like this is a keyboard warrior source of information, when the government who are sourcing that information actually have access to the actual information.
And they could be, the provider of the information could be incredibly sincere, but again, that's not how ministers work. And it shouldn't be the standard that we hold ministers to. Ministers should be able to point to their department and say, we have been told this, and this is how we've generated this information, not that a third party has generated this information. And again, it's a very reductionist conversation, because crime's a really important thing. It affects communities right up and down New Zealand. We want to tackle it and solve it properly. That means looking at it many different ways. It means looking at not just the crime statistics, but it also means looking at the poverty statistics, the drug and alcohol statistics, the mental health statistics, the population statistics, and using that together to draw a really rich pattern of actually, well, how do we solve these problems? If there was genuinely a government that actually believed in social investment, you wouldn't be making these really silly inferences that are made, particularly around the prison population and these numbers. So the challenge that this puts out is that now, where do the ministers go from here? Are they permanently now going to be, using anyone's random Twitter feeds in order to generate data?
See what Kiwi Blog says. I'm sure they'll love those stats and facts and figures that come out.
The Taxpayers Union have entered
there you
the
go.
chat.
And this is great, right? I mean, fabulous, right? But don't then pretend that a ministerial press release or a ministerial statement has any more value than just anybody else's Twitter.
Yeah. There's some questions in the chat that I want to throw at you if you're all right with that, Craig. But Chewie, do you want anything else about this story first of all?
The only thing is that it's essentially is that there's one number that the police that they didn't talk about in there at all, which is that the actual number of police is down about 560 from this time. Is from June 2023.
Yeah,
we
covered that last week.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a press release about what we've said and the hand-drawn graphs that we've used. It's any day, I'm sure.
Oh, just before you go on, Chewie, this is the graph we're talking about. And remember, Police Minister Mark Mitchell has said very clearly the government will deliver 500 net more police on the beat in 2 years. They've got about 9 months to get to that, and so far they're down about 100-ish since they started. So they actually need about 600 from here by the end of this year. So there you go.
Which would be a recruitment drive that we've never seen before in New Zealand.
Yeah. Sorry, Chewie, I cut you off.
Oh, and it's completely broken my brain, clearly. Let's
Sorry.
hit up those questions.
There's a couple of direct questions to you, Craig. Here we go. One from Howie. Hi, Craig. Do you think political donations is the weakest link? Is avoiding New Zealand getting maggoted? I guess to avoiding getting New Zealand maggoted. Political donations getting involved with politics.
I think trust rather than political donations. Either way, are very important. But I think actually politicians retaining the trust of the public is actually much more important. And it's stuff like this that actually corrodes the trust of the public in politicians. If you're honest and you say, do you know what? We had a number. We wanted 500 more police. We've had a recession. We've lost a lot of police overseas because the pay is better. We haven't got there. Hands up. Here's how we're going to fix it. That stops MAGA much faster than just simply stopping donations to one party or another. Retaining the trust of the public and the integrity of what you say is much more important, because it's not. Trump has won because he's prepared to say outrageous things in order to turn politics into essentially entertainment, and that's that's not being caused by political donations. It's been assisted by political donations. That's being caused by, in the US, a very long run and very corrosive distrust in politicians of both sides.
Yeah. There's another one here. Gary Stevenson, Gary's Economics, the YouTube channel. Can you ask Craig his thoughts on Gary Stevenson's economics? I'm sure he'll be familiar with him. Gary's Economics from YouTube.
I actually, the first time I saw Gary's Economics was the first time you put it on Twitter. The other day. So he seems like a very interesting chap. He's a very forthright person. Like me, he's blessed with a very strong accent. But anyone who's helping to have a better conversation about economics is extremely welcome, because you hear so much of the politics in both in New Zealand, the UK, and elsewhere, which essentially is just simply the banks or financial institutions or others telling you everything is fine, just carry on, everything is okay. And it does take someone to say, hang on a second, it's actually not, and we need to do something about this. And that's certainly what I took away from Gary's economics report, was that he's prepared to say in the UK something that not many people are prepared to say, which is that the system is fundamentally broken, and I can see why it's broken, and it's not solvable with a little tweak here or with some technocratic change over here. It needs fundamental reform if you want a different outcome.
And he says very clearly, we played him, he talked to Piers Morgan at the end of last week, and we did an hour playing clips of his and talking to them. And he says it can only be solved with tax. Inequity can only be solved with tax. And his 6 words, I don't know if they're his or he just repeats it, but we're getting t-shirts made, and we want it. The Labour Party, if you're listening, 18 months, his workaround is tax work less, tax wealth more. Beautiful.
Certainly. And if you would follow the balance of taxation in New Zealand, we rely way too much on payroll taxes, so income taxes, and we rely enormously on GST. We have absolutely zero capital taxes at all, as comparable to overseas jurisdictions. Something needs to change, because just assuming that we're right and the rest of the world is wrong is madness.
Yeah. All right, Chewie, have you got anything else you want to get out there?
No, nothing springs to mind. Sorry.
How's the Nikki No Boats t-shirt going there, Craig?
It's great. The next time I'm in in a select committee in Wellington, I'm considering wearing it to the select committee. I just need to find the right finance and expenditure committee, so I can turn up afterwards wearing my Nikki No Boats t-shirt. We'll get an opportunity again in the lead up to the budget, hopefully, and possibly even I can be wearing it during the budget lockup, should I be allowed into the budget lockup this time.
Well, I have been working on that, Craig. You know our little plan. That is, all the paperwork has been delivered. We'll see what they say.
Actually, there is another series of questions from the chat, if you'll indulge me, Craig. There were sightings of an orange cat, and chat wants to know what its name is.
The cat is called Simba. It is my partner's cat, and when it's not getting attention, it prowls about on the roof behind me, and as a consequence, it's probably having a prowl around there because it's a bit annoyed because I haven't fed Simba yet.
It's like every good ginger, Chewie. When you don't get your way, you go sit out on the roof. Isn't that about right?
Yeah, I go cat mode. I just knock things off windowsills. It's very effective. I am also going to draw the line between your partner having a ginger cat and a ginger partner. Sounds like she's collecting beerware.
I'm going to leave that there, for the purposes of harmony in my household.
All right, Craig. Thanks for coming on. We love having you. I think we should get you doing a podcast. We should talk about that. I think you should do your own podcast, and we should host it for you. We should talk.
But yes, happy to help, and look forward to talking with you again soon.
All right, Craig. All the best. Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate you.
Cheers, Craig.